how would you tell people that this is you personally? How would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, hey there, everybody on the YouTubes, or I guess that portion of the YouTube that's here with us today, right now. Welcome to Jackson with Jackson. I think 13. Is that what this is? I can't even see. It's like
could be
cut off. Yeah, it's 13. Look at that. This is lucky number 13. Jackson with Jackson. Jackson raids again, taken of course from the wonderful, the iffy Godzilla film, Godzilla Raids Again, which was turned out in less than a year from the actual original release of Godzilla, because Godzilla did really well, and so they just wanted a quick cash grab movie. It's not very good, whatever. It did introduce the idea of Godzilla fighting monsters, though, other big monsters, so it is important for that reason. But that's not why we're here. We're here for Jackson with Jackson. And before we get going, we have a couple of one super chat and one membership milestone chat. We have Valkyrie Vision who says Mothra engage, and we're going to take a drink for that. $4.99. Thank you very much, Valkyrie Vision. And then Dark Law Dragon has been a member at the Tetrapod level for 7 months and says AIG is a bag of broken swords with a Mothra and a Godzilla emoji. We're going to take a drink for that too. All right. Now that is in regards to the drinking rules. We're going to get into those in very shortly. But first, Jackson, a former debate opponent of yours, has recently made a video about his debates, but there seems to be a glaring omission. You want to give us a quick explanation of what just happened there?
Oh, yeah. All right. I don't watch Matt Powell's channel, but a mutual friend of ours posted a recent video, just a few hours ago, I believe, video he posted on his channel, that Matt posted on Matt's channel.
Right.
Where Matt talks about his former his debates. He gets personal about his past debates. He discusses 3 people, only one of which I recognize. I don't know who the other dudes were. But the first one's the Raging Atheist, who, if you guys remember, Matt had a series of discussions with the Raging Atheist, culminating in a movie.
Mm-hmm. A feature-length film.
Yes, a feature-length movie.
Which lets you know that it's in color on the DVD box art.
Because, thank God, we were worried it might be in monochrome or something. Matt talks about in the video he released today that he really didn't want to talk to the Raging Atheist originally, which...
Weird.
It's a little strange. If I didn't want to talk to someone, I, 1, wouldn't talk to them, and 2, wouldn't make a feature-length film about talking to them.
Yeah, and also, outside of that, wasn't he, trying to engage the Raging Atheist in, social activities?
Yeah, they went, at the very least, I remember they mentioned going bowling at least once, which, again, not something I'd do with someone I don't like, or wouldn't want to associate with.
I always bowl with the people that I never want to see. I just close my eyes. I mean, granted, it means my bowling average is just terrible. But, it also means that when I accidentally hit them with the bowling ball with my eyes closed, it wasn't intentional, maybe.
Dapper, I went bowling this past week, and I got 4 strikes in a row.
Nice.
Which has literally never happened before, and will probably never happen again.
Well, to you.
Yes, for me personally.
Right. Okay.
I'm sure it'll happen for professional bowlers, regularly, but for me, that never happens.
Congrats.
But yeah, so one person, when Matt first got popular, he did a whole bunch of talks. He went on everybody's channel and was talking about how atheists spend their whole day, just drinking soda and playing video games. Because that's what made him famous, was that clip from his church where he's like a pastor or junior pastor.
He's complaining about
like
people having fun, basically.
Yeah, before he moved out to the possible pedophile Adventureland. And so
the word, man, I want to keep the monetization up.
I said possible.
No, but you also said the word.
Oh,
this is YouTube. You gotta use code words.
Oh,
don't worry about it though. Just move past it.
I can't. I can't think of anyway. Sorry, I have my bad. Um, uh, anyway, so that clip got him famous, and he went around a bunch of people's channels. One of the chats that he was in was on Godless Cranium's channel, where he and Shannon Q moderated a discussion between Matt Powell and yours truly.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt made no mention of that debate in which he said the air and space.
Yeah, that's where we found out that Matt thinks that the sun is literally on fire and that there's space and air to provide the sun with the oxygen it needs to keep burning.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's basically JM Truth, the flat earther.
and it's so funny to me that like of the debates that he claims he absolutely destroyed the atheists, which maybe he did.
Maybe.
That one didn't come up.
Weird.
It's so strange that one didn't come up.
No, he's uploaded that debate to his channel, right?
Of sorts.
What does that mean?
Oh, well, it means he cut out all of my speaking parts.
Oh.
And the funny thing about it is it's like this comes full circle because I've recently found a channel called Forrest Valkai, which he makes really good content where he responds to people and stuff. I haven't watched a whole bunch of his videos, but the ones I have seen I liked. And he covered something of Matt Powell's. Well, Powell did this video where he cut out all of my speaking. So he took the debate from Cranium's channel, cut out all of my speaking parts, just put the parts where he was talking, uploaded that to his channel. Somebody else took that video or took the parts, or took the original video, I guess you might say, took the original video and showed this is the part that from the original, this is the part that Matt cut out, and compared those side by side. And then Forrest Valkai, when he was looking at background information on Matt Powell, found that video and showed it, and I was like, "Hey, I feel validated! Yay!"
Yep.
So
it's actually kind of hilarious how much of your video or of that debate he cut out just to get rid of all the things that you were pointing out to show why Matt's a complete idiot. But yeah, we just thought we would mention that real quick at the beginning here because it's not what we're really here about, but it was too amusing to pass up the fact that this happened. Because Matt Powell might be the thinnest skinned man I have ever heard of. He has
no, he's up there with another certain a 3-letter channel that we know of.
Yeah,
that he's also pretty thin skinned.
Yeah, for some reason all the guys, the Earth creationists who like to be all macho when they're talking to their buddies and whatnot, they also have monomolecular skin. It's a single molecule thick. That's it.
And they're very obsessed with your levels of circulating hormones. I've never had a partner who cared about my levels of circulating hormones as much as these grown men on the internet. Literally never.
I remember once being told that maybe I, Dapper Dino, am proud of my estrogen. And I'm like, well, I mean, it is an important sex hormone for all, basically all animals. So I guess, I don't know. Right. I do have estrogen, just like, everything else, basically. Apocalypse Mao has joined the channel for the membership program at the level of Tetrapod. Welcome to the channel membership program, Apocalypse Mao. Guys, send in those Tetrapods. But let's get into the drinking rules, right? Because we're here to talk about Charles Jackson and have some drinking rules about that. So, we already did a couple. One of which is that if anyone super chats anything to the effect that AIG is a bag of dicks or something like that, we'll take a drink for that. Also, if someone super chats one of the emojis for the channel that involves a kaiju like Godzilla or Mothra or King Ghidorah, we'll take a drink for that. Now, I do recognize that some people have problems getting those to chat, whether it be because of accessibility or because of they don't work very well on mobile. So I'm pretty if you mention one of those three, we'll probably take that and take a drink for that. But also, we take a drink for every gifted membership. So memberships can be gifted here on YouTube now. You can gift, I believe, 1 or 5. And yeah, if you get 5, we take 5 drinks. But most of the drink triggers actually regard Dr. Charles Jackson, Bad Jackson as we call him. So if Charles Jackson, if Bad Jackson says something that's just so stupid it kind of is threatening to melt our brains, we take a drink, for cooling purposes. If we if Dr. Jackson actually says something that's factually correct, that he's not just quoting from someone, take a drink for that. If Dr. Charles Jackson tells a story that didn't happen, like perhaps he has confused the argument that he won with his shampoo bottle with an argument he had in real life, take a drink for that. If Dr. Charles Jackson mentions the... oh, there's one. If we hear Mothra or Godzilla, we'll take a drink. We'll take a drink for that. If Bad Jackson mentions the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or prominent members or leaders thereof, or their various activities, especially during the 1930s and 40s, take a drink for that. We will also take a drink anytime he tells a joke that doesn't land. And if one of us makes a prediction about what his next point is going to be, get it right, take a drink. Now, this has to be like a prediction that isn't completely obvious, right? Like if we're like, oh, I'll bet he thinks humans and chimpanzees are in different created kinds. Well, of course he does. He's a general creationist. Come on. But now we have a few more things that have come in. I think that covers it. If it didn't cover it, you know, we'll figure it out. So let's see. First of all, Arachamian just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships, which means that TD Lane, the N-Bead, Theros Rex, Lady Moonweb, and Interrobang were all just gifted memberships. Welcome, guys. First, I do appreciate that everyone sent the tetrapod emojis to welcome them. Second, there are a huge number of videos in early access right now. I just counted. And I currently have, I believe, like 14 or something videos that you can watch right now as a channel member that aren't up on the channel. Like I'm several months ahead on that. So that'll be great. Also, if you connect your Discord to your YouTube account, so go from Discord to YouTube, that should add you to the special members and patrons Discord channel. All that stuff is great. We also, so first we're going to take 5 drinks for that. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And by the way, I'm drinking whiskey cola. And also, if you decide to play along with us, which you absolutely do not have to,
I got Pepsi.
Oh, there you go. Please drink responsibly. Know your own limits. And if you want to participate with something other than an alcoholic beverage, that's perfectly fine. You can play with water, tea. Some people have played with vape pens or whatever you want, right? It's all up to you. There's like the drinking game police aren't going to come. The real police might if you drink too much. So, you know, be careful out there. Also, we have Too Young to Feel This Old for $5. It says, what are we drinking? Godzilla. So we're going to take a drink for the Godzilla. I just said I'm drinking a whiskey cola. It is the same cheapest possible Canadian whiskey that I was drinking when I was on Chesh's channel the other day. And that came with the Godzilla, which I did drink for. We also have Star Runner, who has joined the channel as the Amnio level. So welcome, Star Runner. Thank you very much. And for $5, Screwbucket says, AIG reminds me of a hemp or plastic-covered collection of former North American vice presidents circa 2001 to 2009. All right. You know what? We'll take a drink for it. So there we go. And now, before we even start the video, we're already 9 drinks in, because that's how this goes sometimes. All right, guys. We were just hearing Dr. Charles Jackson, Bad Jackson, tell us about how all these hominins are... Well, basically, first he lied about things like their locomotor skills or abilities and things like that. But then he also points out that because there are people saying that they're not directly ancestral to Homo sapiens, which, yeah, that's probably true, that they just, like, don't count for some reason, which is dumb. But we're going to get into that more as we go on. So here we go.
Lucy's been dropped by some researchers in evolution community even as nothing but a dead monkey.
Well, I will say Lucy is in fact a dead monkey. So, you know, we'll take a drink for him getting something right. I don't know why that's supposed to be controversial or a problem. I mean, I don't know anyone who says that Lucy is alive. That seems extremely unlikely.
She's hiding out in like the Congo or something, just like Mokele and Mbembe.
While missing a very large portion of her bones.
Yeah, well, you know, they can only take what they can grab.
She's not doing too well. She's in traction, guys. in the Congo. But also, of course, she's a monkey. Like, so are you, Dr. Charles Jackson. Like, what else would she be? You think she was going to be like a dead hyena? Like, what? Just such a weird thing. Lucy's nothing but a dead monkey. Yes, this is correct.
Well, a monkey not related to humans in any way, shape, or form.
Well, yeah, that's his. That is apparently his implication.
Yeah, instead of the the hominin species that was related to us, though not directly ancestral, but preserves characteristics which are transitional between us and earlier fossils. So
apparently, Lucy is undercover in Vegas as an Elvis impersonator. She must be one of the shortest Elvis impersonators. She was only like 3 feet tall.
I can believe it. I can see it.
All right.
Of course, I would believe that these were dead monkeys and people that drowned during Noah's flood, for the most.
Which ones?
Yeah,
which are which?
Which are which?
Please tell us which Australopiths are dead monkeys and which are people.
And the thing is, he doesn't have any criterion. Oh, also, I forgot, guys. So we are still running the if we get to a certain amount in super chats plus memberships, that we will do feathers for my next video. However, I do have to up it to 125 instead of 120 for the simple reason that since we started regularly hitting it, I've lost a year's worth of points for my render farm, which means I have to do this a little less often because I'll actually be unable to use the render farm in probably like a few months if I keep doing it for almost every video. So it's 125 now. It's a $5 increase. I still think you guys can hit that easily if you want to. Anyway.
Part, or maybe drowned in their little cave during a flash flood or something. Maybe that's what the Naledi fossils are.
So here's a weird thing about drowning during the flood. Isn't Charles Jackson associated with CMI?
Is it CMI or AIG? I can't remember which one.
Well, he's certainly not ICR.
Okay.
So
I think they kind of trade people, some people back and forth.
Those two do, yeah. ICR less so because ICR is even wackier than the other two.
Right.
Right. In my opinion, the of the big three, CMI, AIG, and ICR, CMI is at the top. It's a pretty significant gap, and then you get to AIG, which is significantly less.
In terms of what?
CMI is much more likely to actually be telling the truth when they say things. They also are much more likely to call out other creationists for doing things that they shouldn't.
That I'll agree with. Yeah.
Now, of course, we're starting with like from the young Earth creationist standpoint, so we're already starting at a standpoint where our like level of like our bar for what's acceptable behavior is only a few notches above like the flat Earth society. So
sure, but you're right. They call out stuff like the Palexi tracks were not human. They were made by like ornithomimids, and the thing that Hovind talks about with it's like the rocks with the patina on them that have the ancient aliens and stuff.
The Ica stones. Yeah.
They call all that sort of stuff out. Yeah.
Actually, recently they called out creationists for inappropriately implying that the soft tissue finds in dinosaur bones were like original material when they're very much not. So that's
good on them.
I mean, that's a pretty big thing. But then, pretty big step down, you get to AIG, who are not quite as crazy as ICR, because ICR is just completely bonkers. Like
I've seen your Galuza video on that. Yeah,
I don't even know what's going on over at ICR. Like, someone should check in on them and be like, "Hey guys, y'all right?" But anyway, the reason I bring it up is because both CMI and AIG hold to the same flood boundary idea, which is that the end Cretaceous is the flood boundary. So all of the Cenozoic, so that's everything in here is all post-flood. So I'm pretty sure that Charles Jackson also is a member of at least one of those two organizations that holds the Cretaceous Paleogene as the flood boundary, which means these were not killed by the flood. They might have been killed by a flood, maybe, but certainly not the flood. So I don't know why he's going with this. Also, Smitty, who's been a channel member at the Amnio level for 7 months, says, play Dungeons of Dreadmore. I mean, I can't play that right now because we're doing Jackson with Jackson. But thank you for the advice. I will look into it.
Afterwards, maybe.
Afterwards, I think we're going to go hang out on my channel and watch some Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 2 with the late, great Jason David Frank. Anyway. And not Toy Trang, because she's already exited the show.
The Africanus is more chimp-like than Afarensis, an evolutionary reversal. Not very likely.
No?
Tim White makes fun of theories that...
So first, none of them are particularly chimp-like, because chimps aren't very much like the common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees. So one of the things that people just kind of forget is that chimpanzees themselves have been evolving from that common ancestor just as long as humans have, and they are also very derived. They have very derived hands, they have very derived diets, they have derived skull. Like, there's a lot they have extremely derived Y chromosomes. There's a lot about chimpanzees that are quite derived. Just like with humans. It's just that it's not the things that humans tend to prioritize when they're assessing how much like a human something is, right? Humans will just lump gorillas and chimpanzees in a barrel, and put humans off to the side. But that's not actually reasonable, because all three of those groups are highly derived in different ways.
Yes.
But humans have, biases.
The whole idea that chimps, gorillas, and orangs just knuckle walk. Oh, hey, Dapper, did you know you're live? You're live now. The whole idea that they are all just knuckle walkers, that they all do the same motion when they move terrestrially is wrong. They all have their own different independent modes of terrestrial movement. And once you actually look at the biomechanics of how they move on the ground, then you start to see that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. All the great apes have different modes of movement, to varying degrees. And so it's not at all surprising to literally any paleoanthropologist that these fossil hominins also have unique modes of movement.
Right?
Like, that doesn't surprise anyone at all.
And also, it's not a surprise to anyone that a group of hominins may have adapted to greater arboreality after having spent some time with lower amounts of arboreality. Like, that's not some kind of, oh my goodness, shocking news. Like, no, that's a pretty normal thing. Organisms of various groups live in different places, which means that they adapt to different things. It's like if I said, oh, hey, look, the desert fox went from, through evolutionary time, went from a population living in temperate forests to living in an arid, sandy desert, and it made these adaptations. And then you're like, aha, but the Arctic fox lives in cold forests, so now what? It's like, I don't know. That doesn't change anything. Yes, that's true. Okay. Also, Command Cyborg, who's been a member for 22 months, my goodness, at the amniote level, says, I perhaps should use this space better, but I can finally use this on a drinking stream. Sends the drink emoji, AIG are a bag of peckers, the Godzilla emoji, and another drink emoji. So we'll take a drink for that. Thank you very much, Command Cyborg. All right, here we go.
Let's say evolution could go backwards. It goes against Dolo's law of evolution.
That's not what that is.
Oh my goodness, I'm taking a drink for that. Go ahead, Jackson.
Okay, sorry, I was also getting a drink.
Oh,
yeah. No, so first of all, that's not what Dolo's law of irreversibility is. But also, where to begin with this? Okay, first of all, I guess we'll explain what Dolo's law is.
Yeah, that's where we should start.
Dolo's law is the idea that, yes, evolution can't go backwards. You cannot reverse an evolutionary trajectory. Now, I have a problem with this because, for one, it's called Dolo's law, and it's not really a law. It's more of a statement of statistical probability. If you have a single mutation that occurs in some gene, odds that you could have a reversion mutation aren't super low, right? Like, it's not that low.
Right.
However, if you go, a number of generations, like 100 generations, and you've built up a whole bunch of mutations, the odds that you're going to reverse all of those mutations becomes pretty statistically low. Not necessarily impossible, but it becomes pretty darn low. So that's, for one, why I don't... It's not a law. It's not a description of how this thing is necessarily going to happen. It's the probability is just getting lower as time goes on. But also, that's not necessarily what's happening. If you have a population which becomes, which is arboreal, adapts to becoming terrestrial, and then adapts again to becoming arboreal, they're almost certainly not having a whole bunch of reversion mutations.
Yeah, you're not going back to the previous genotype, even if you're getting to a similar phenotype at the end.
And so, to illustrate this in a very interesting way that was discovered recently, everyone here, I'm sure, has heard of Tiktaalik. If you haven't, super famous fisher that was described back in 2004 up in from northern Canada, and it has it's well on its way to becoming terrestrial, but it's not quite there yet. In terms of our Sarcopterygian ancestors, our lobe-finned fish ancestors. So the cool thing is, it turns out that another fish, or another fossil, another lobe-finned fish was described from a similar area called Kikictania. The cool thing is, as this lineage, our ancestral lineage, Eucenopteron, Panderichthes, Tiktaalik, Canthostega, these guys are becoming more and more adapted to life on land. There was actually a reversion. So Kikictania became independently adapted more towards, adapted to being aquatic again. It didn't revert. It didn't revert in its morphology.
Did just become Eucenopteron?
No, it didn't just go back to being Eucenopteron. It actually had to evolve its fins, which are now better for load bearing, back into swimming fins.
And it did so in a different way than the ancestral fin, huh?
Right, exactly.
Kind of like how whale fins aren't just fish fins.
Right, exactly. You have to take what you have and change it. You have to go down this new evolutionary trajectory towards some endpoint. You're not reverting. You're not going backwards in time to what it was before. So just everything you said was wrong.
Which is why we drank for it.
True.
Under the evolution theory. So Australopithecus africanus is backwards to the evolution story, so I think I can get rid of all the Australopithecines.
No, you can't.
That's not how that works.
We're taking another drink, my goodness. Hold on, guys. All right. So basically, every single thing that he's taken off so far has been for reasons that in no way invalidate the broad picture of human evolution or remove these from being transitional species. Like, none of it. The thing is, evolution predicts that you will find transitional species in the fossil record. In fact, while we talk about transitional species, you know what? We're going to put up the slideshow while I talk about it. So, evolution predicts that these intermediate morphologies should exist, or should have existed in the past, and that we should be able to find fossils of them. But, just like today, when you have organisms with intermediate morphologies, they were part of a group of organisms, which probably included many different species, not all of which survived. In fact, most of them would have gone extinct rather than evolving into something new. So what that means is that chances are when you find a species with intermediate morphology, like the ones we're seeing on screen right now, it's probably not the actual species that's directly ancestral to the modern crown group that you're under investigation, right? So, or even, later, but now is still extinct groups, right? So if we find like a transitional pterosaur, probably not going to be the direct ancestor to actual pterosaurs. Okay.
Pepper, which screen are you putting it on?
Oh, it's only going out to YouTube. You can't see it, sorry.
Oh, okay. I was like, am I messing up? My bad. Okay, go ahead.
So saying that something is probably not directly ancestral to something else doesn't make it not a transitional form, and there's still no reason to expect those things to exist, except for evolution being true. If you believed that life forms were just created distinct by God, then no one should be able to predict intermediate forms. No one should. Because there's no reason to think that they exist, and there's no way to be systematic about it unless your idea of created kinds is that God created a whole bunch of kinds specifically to make it look like they actually did in fact evolve. Which, I guess you can think that. I can't stop you from thinking that. I would question what that does to like your theology and your epistemology and the possibility of even having a coherent epistemological framework. But hey, so yeah, which is why creationists spent so long, and still spend so long, saying that transitional species just don't exist, even though they do. And then when they have to address them like this, because there's just so much evidence, they just say nonsense like, oh, one group of Australopithecines developed secondary arboreality to some degree. Okay. Anyway.
This is where Australopithecus sediba would have fit in if the rest of the evolutionist community ever does accept it. Homo habilis handy.
Okay.
This is not a this is not a phylogeny. This is just a.
It's when did things
chronology.
exist? Yeah. All right. I'm gonna take a drink about Australopithecus sediba being accepted. No one's rejecting Australopithecus sediba in the sense that the animals that have been referred to that taxon didn't exist. Like, everyone knows they exist, right? The question is just, should we call them a new species? And ultimately, whatever you choose is going to be fundamentally arbitrary to some point, because species are kind of fake. So it doesn't really matter whether or not they're accepted as a separate species or they're lumped into a larger species, like Australopithecus afarensis or something. Like, it doesn't actually matter. Those organisms still existed with the morphology that they had. They're still transitional. They're still a distinct population. Like, maybe they'll be Australopithecus afarensis sediba, right? Like, they can be a subspecies, or maybe they are a species. It doesn't matter. You're saying
Sometimes...
that because people might have a non-optimal arrangement of deck chairs, that the Titanic isn't sinking. That's not how it works.
In the case of Australopiths, some you might find some references to an Australopithecus prometheus, but it's not typically considered a valid taxon by most anthropologists. So.
Yeah.
Just to your point in that regard.
Sal has mentioned his I like Sal, and I don't want this to come off as mean, but his rather post hoc idea that transitional species were created by God to allow scientific discoveries.
What?
At some point, Sal, maybe we should have you on and we can talk about that, because I have a lot to say about it, but we're not streaming about that, so I don't want to take up a whole lot of time with that. But yeah, I have some serious questions about that hypothesis. So, anyway.
Man, Homo erectus, upright walking man, and then these ones that I mentioned before, we'll get to them. Homo habilis never gave rise to Homo erectus, said Fred Spohr of University College in London, when they found that these two were actually the same age. So it couldn't be another million years apart.
Wait, hold on. He said habilis couldn't have given rise to erectus?
Yes, because there was overlap in their chronology. We're going to take a drink.
My grandparents are doing. Wonder how they're doing right now.
We're going to take a drink and we're going to talk about that. All right, so let's talk about speciation, right? Now, a lot of times we talk about speciation and we kind of imagine it as like one species like splitting in half. But that's not really accurate. What usually happens is some smaller segment of the population breaks off and for some reason is no longer able to interbreed with the original population and often enters a new environment, right? So this is allopatric speciation. It's probably the most common kind of speciation. It happens right now. So if you have the larger original population that's reasonably well adapted to its environment, such that it's probably not undergoing much directional or disruptive selection, right? It's probably just stabilizing selection. It's near the fitness optimum. So any significant deviations in its phenotype are going to be selected against, which means other than like neutral mutations, you're basically not getting a whole lot of genetic evolution. Okay, but then this new subpopulation has the founder effect. So already its sample of the original population is not going to be completely representative. So some genetic variations are going to be more common in this fragment population than the main population. Also, they're probably going to have to adapt to a new environment. Those two things together are going to make them become significantly distinct both genetically and morphologically. So, if those populations keep doing that, it's reasonable to continue to say that the larger population, the original population, is still the same species, while giving a new specific name to the other population, because not only have they changed morphologically, they might even be biologically isolated in terms of gene flow, right? Like there might actually be barriers to reproduction now. So you give something a new name. the fact that this is evident in the fossil record, the fact that the fossil record looks like how evolution works right now, isn't a problem for evolution. Right? Because that's all he's saying. Is that, hey, an ancestral population continued on while being morphologically similar, while another population, closer related, had morphological novelties that occurred, and then those two populations were coextensive for some time. Or coexisting for some time, sorry, not coexisting. Yeah, that's how evolution works, my guy.
And it could even be the case that Homo erectus is in fact not descended from Homo habilis. That's possible.
That's true too,
but
right?
That still has no bearing
right.
on the fact that these two are related. No bearing whatsoever.
So, by the way, Evidence and Reason, Sal, says, Happy Thanksgiving, and sure, I'll visit. All right, well, we'll have to set something up, because I would like a full rundown of what you think the transitional species with the scientific discoveries thing is. I find that, one, rather unconvincing, but two, very interesting. Let's see. Star Runner says, are sea wolves a good example of this? I would say probably not yet, but they could be, right? So sea wolves are a population of gray wolves who are living an increasingly aquatic lifestyle. They get almost all of their food from the ocean. They live near beaches. They do not tend to hunt in the forests. If this population sufficiently adapts to aquatic life that they become like obligately at least semi-aquatic, what will probably happen is that the larger population of the gray wolf, Canis lupus, will continue on as it was, more or less, because Canis lupus is already well adapted to pack hunting in things like forests or scrublands and things like that. So yeah, there's a very good chance that that could become a new species while we just keep calling the gray wolf, Canis lupus. And we have, like, I don't know, Canis pacificus or something, because I'm pretty sure they're on the Pacific coast. If they're not, then I'll change it to, like, I don't know, Canis atlanticus, whatever.
Natans.
Yeah, there you go. Canis natans. That's not a bad name. I like that one. All right, so anyway, yeah, here we go.
It was like finding out that your grandmother and your great-grandmother were sisters.
No, well, first of all, there are places where that
bad
happens.
News for you.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, because I mean, look, places like Alabama exist.
I wasn't gonna say it, but you went there. All right.
Yeah. But also, it's more like finding out that your grandmother met your great-grandmother. It's much more like that. Like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they were direct mother and child, right? So, like, yeah, they probably did meet. Most people have met their mom. Not everyone, but most people have a period in their life when they're alive and also their mom is alive. Actually, I would say everyone, but I mean, I'm talking about like after you're able to like form memories and such. Because, you know, yeah, that's not exactly a shocking finding to find out that your great-grandmother and your grandmother knew each other personally.
Rather than actually one being the ancestor of the other.
That's still not precluded, but okay.
Homo habilis and Homo erectus were non-sequence contemporaries. And so that people did not come from Homo habilis, says the evolutionist community.
However,
Homo
one
erectus
came before the other.
Yeah, basically that just means that one didn't completely replace the other one at a single point in time, which we shouldn't expect, even if one is ancestral to the other.
almost certainly was a dead end and not, as some scientists had argued, our ancestor. Newsweek reported on DNA statistical findings that the evolutionist community was saying it's not really our ancestor, but another dead end. So,
I mean, most of everything is a dead end in evolution, right? Like,
what does he mean by that, though?
he just means it didn't leave living descendants, I'm pretty sure.
No, I mean, like, what is he saying about the genetics thing? Like, we don't have gene data from either Homo erectus or Homo habilis. We have some proteomic data.
Maybe that's what it means.
That wasn't, but that was also like, that was, I'm pretty sure Homo erectus is considered ancestral to us, but we don't have any for Homo habilis, so I don't know how he would. I don't know.
Look,
what that
I think
means.
there's a fair chance that he's misquoting this, but
okay.
Even if he's not, And Homo habilis has been said by at least some scientists to not be directly ancestral to Homo sapiens.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised.
So you can take that flagstone out of the walkway leading up to us. Homo erectus DNA disqualifies it from being the common ancestor. The rest of them
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
weird, but
This is like the kind of stuff that Gould was writing against back in like the 70s. He was saying like, please stop saying every hominin we find is our ancestor.
right, because almost
stop.
none of them would be, most likely.
This is stuff they were saying back in the 70s, and here he is in. This was just like a few years ago, and he's still saying, "Yeah, we're trying to like force every single hominin in the fossil record into a direct line to humans." Like, no, it's not what we're doing, my dude.
The thing is, if you start with the assumption, we're going to do like some hypothesis testing, right? So which means you first start out with the assumption that your hypothesis is true. What would you expect to see? So if the hypothesis of human evolution, that humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor some 6 or 7 million years ago, and then a group of these Miocene apes are evolving to become upright and then bigger and bigger brained, ultimately resulting in Homo sapiens being the last man standing among this group. And you expect to find their fossils. What you actually shouldn't expect is to find very many of the actual direct line, because chances are there were a whole bunch of species in this group at various points, and that you're more likely to find the ones that aren't directly ancestral, because there's just going to be a lot more of them. So if the whole evolution of humanity story is true, what we see is what we should expect to see. Now, if it's not true, I have trouble figuring out why we should see any of these things.
are humans. They're not monkeys at all, Heidelberg.
We're just going to take a drink for them very much being human or monkeys, whether or not they count as human. And also, notice how creationists are loath to actually give like a morphological definition for where human starts. The most rigorous example I've seen was a baraminology study from Paleologos here and Todd Wood, which was published in the Answers Research Journal, which using the to put it kindly, at best questionable methods of baraminology, did in fact recover 2 clusters, one of which they declared was the human cluster because, well, it includes Homo sapiens, and the other one which they declared to be the, I believe they called it the Australopithecus cluster, although I'm not positive.
Something like that.
It caused quite a stir because a number of the things that they said were in the human cluster are what most people would consider very basal, and what most creationists have traditionally considered to be just apes. So it was controversial even in younger creationist circles because the conclusions were quite generous in what ends up being in the humankind. But even that, as far as I can tell, did not contain an actual like morphological definition for what counts as humans. It was a statistical test. And I do think it had some methods problems, although if you really want to dive into that more, you should look at Gutsick Gibbons' talk with Paleologos about that. Because, she did a lot more in-depth analysis of that paper. I mostly just skimmed it.
And even still, like, when it comes down to it, what is the difference between the clusters? It's like relative sizes of parts that we all share.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
it's not like the Australopiths have a whole bunch of bones that are just flatly absent in humans. Like, no, it's like, okay, the molars for this group are, I don't know, freaking like 1 centimeter, whereas for this other group they're 0.8 centimeters. And it's like, okay, all right, so you found your clusters, but like, do you really think that matters?
Yeah,
you think that's that big of a difference?
I have a problem with the clustering techniques and the idea of discontinuity in baraminological clustering, because I'm not convinced that that's actually data that distinguishes the common ancestry hypothesis from a separate ancestry hypothesis. Because I think of very, very, very good reasons why common ancestry should result in clustering that is lacks continuity when you're observing either extant or a non-exhaustive group of taxa in whatever larger taxon you're looking at. So I would expect that if you did a baraminological study of, like, say, some, like, say, the extant caniforms, that you would not recover them using baraminology as a single kind, no matter whether or not they actually do share common ancestry. And I don't want to get into that super deep now because I have to more formalize my thoughts, and I think I might end up actually trying to make some kind of video about that. But then again, terminology is not the most entertaining thing to talk about on YouTube.
We also discussed how even things where you can have like who the parent is and who the offspring is, you can have discontinuity in terms of certain features.
That's true.
Right? Like colors, especially, like if you're looking at butterflies or flowers or things like that, colors are not necessarily going to be continuous. You can have a parent who's one color and then an offspring that's a different color.
Yeah.
You're not going to have this insensible gradations of colors between them. It's like, no, it's one has this and then the other has this, and there's no middle ground. And that just happens because that's a function of different like embryological processes.
Well, so
right?
I do believe though that terminology does have techniques to use to weight or even reject certain character traits because of the weakness in their signal strength in coming up with their clustering data, which is a thing, right? That's even a thing in like cladistic analysis of phylogenetics, right? There's some traits that you're just like, look, the signal's so weak on this trait, we're just not going to consider it. Changes so easily, and it does not have form smooth gradient, so we're just going to ditch this one. So anyway, here we go.
Man, Neanderthal man, Cro-Magnon man, and then there of course is us, Homo sapiens.
Oh my goodness.
And the Homo floresiensis.
Cro-Magnon is also just humans.
Yes,
it's literally
yes,
just
it is.
us. It's even anatomically modern Homo sapiens.
Well, yeah, we'll take a drink for Dr. Charles Jackson basically just saying, hey, anatomically modern humans, that's anatomically modern humans. Yes, it is, Dr. Charles Jackson. Yes, it is. All right, here we go.
The Hobbit fossil they found on the Isle of Flores.
Oh, he's going to say it.
Floresiensis?
He's going to say it's just a human.
The Indonesian islands. No one.
Oh, no, he's going to say it's a human with like microcephaly or something.
Yep, no, he's going to say it.
No one quite knows what to make of those, except that maybe they were a tribe of pygmies. But probably none of them are saying it's a missing link. I don't even know why they put it in.
No one's saying it's a missing link because no one thinks that it's like it's coexisting with modern humans for most of its lifetime, right? That's why no one's calling it some kind of missing link, because it's not morphologically intermediate between ancestral forms and modern human forms, because it's, around with modern humans and is different from modern humans, but they're not just a tribe of so-called humans. They're a different species. They actually are probably even older than the Homo erectus species that spread into...
Yes.
They actually...
Yeah, the more recent analyses favor them as like being closer to Homo habilis, which is some very interesting implications for Abilene biogeography.
Yeah, this actually indicates that there might have been a hominin exodus from Africa before Homo erectus, which previously was thought to be the earliest hominin to spread out of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently no. Apparently hominins went at least once to get Homo floresiensis over to Flores, as well as presumably other places. Then again with Homo erectus, then again with Denisovans and Neanderthals, and then yet again with Homo sapiens in subsequent waves of migration from Africa. Well, also, Homo sapiens also remained in Africa. Pretend that, they all left. Which is odd because Neanderthals and Denisovans didn't seem to remain in Africa. It's a little weird with that. Anyway.
There, they don't put any connection to it, but that's very controversial anyway.
There's nothing controversial about Homo floresiensis not being a direct human ancestor. No one thinks it is. No one. It's very much not a direct ancestor to humans because it is way too basally derived for that to be reasonable. And also way too late for it to be that basally derived and also ancestral to humans. It probably evolved into Homo floresiensis while Homo sapiens were evolving into Homo sapiens in Africa.
Okie dokie. Well, maybe I should leave that up. Again, we can talk about any of these.
Hold on.
And we could talk about DNA.
Look at what the last thing he put up there. Most, quote, missing links are extinct monkeys.
The rest are just straight up Homo sapien?
I'm just loving that most extinct are just extinct monkeys. Yes. They are all extinct monkeys. I'm taking a drink for it. And then note, the things that aren't Homo sapiens aren't Homo sapiens. Homo neanderthalensis, not Homo sapien. Denisovans, not Homo sapiens. Homo frisiensis, not Homo sapiens. That's why they have a different species name.
That's just your evolutionist bias. Dapper.
Right? Goodness. And the thing is, like, look, if you want to say that they're all Homo sapiens, go ahead and do the actual morphological analysis, right? Show why they're within the expected range of diversity for Homo sapiens. Just do it. And of course, also, it's weird because creationists also think that, species can undergo this ridiculous hypermutation after the flood. So why couldn't humans do that? What is it about humans that they don't get to speciate? You can have one pair of canids on the ark that speciates apparently into everything from Borophagenes to like Hesperocyon to Canis lupus to whatever the new genus name is for the direwolf. I can't remember. And they have to do that in a very small space because remember, we have archaeological evidence from what creationists consider to be just a few hundred years after the flood, like from the ancient Egyptians and Babylonians, of modern species in their art and in their writing system. And they have words for these modern species, right? Like you look at Egyptian hieroglyphics, they don't just have generic, like, axotripid bird. They have very specific, like, hawks and eagles and whatnot, and vultures. Specific modern species. So this speciation event didn't have the 4,400 years. It had, like, 300 years. But apparently humans can't do that. They can't speciate. Also, Lineage Robert says, who's been a member for 2 months at Tetrapod level, says, we're extant monkeys. Yes, you are. You humans are extant monkeys. I'm an extant Ceratosaurus, but that's a different... All right, here we go.
Or junk DNA, or body parts, or homology.
You're just
or
saying
any
words.
other missing links, like birds to dinosaurs to birds, or fish to amphibians, or amphibians to reptiles, or reptiles to mammals, or reptiles to birds, or
what does this have to do with anything?
I don't know. He's just naming things. And also, what's the difference between dinosaurs to birds and reptiles to birds? That's a question I have for Dr.
Don't
Jackson
you know
here.
neognates are descended from theropods, but pelignates are descended from squamates.
Oh, I see. Thanks, David Peters.
That's how that works.
My goodness.
New conspiracy theory just dropped. No, it's like the April Fool's post that Darren Naish did that Alan Fiducia thought was real.
Oh my goodness.
Where it was like different clades of theropods gave rise to different groups of birds.
I remember that. And then Alan Fiducia was just like, oh yeah, see how crazy these birds or dinosaur people are? It's like, my goodness, dude. First
He put that in a book he wrote.
I know. Alan, come on, my guy.
It's
Come
like
on.
it's almost sad. You really feel like if it were just a blog post he did somewhere, like, okay, you can, go haha, whatever. But like he wrote that down, ran it through an editor, put it in like an illustrated book and published that. At that point, you just feel bad for him,
Yeah. All right. Well, we're not here to dunk on Alan Fiducia, although maybe someday, because while he's not a creationist, he certainly acts like one in some cases.
He's got problems.
people, but for anything you want about any of this, I can go into detail, and actually Brother Sean had, yes.
Well done.
Ooh, it's just like Phil Donahue, there we go.
Okay.
Oh, what's happening?
Ooh, now we're gonna be live
My goodness, the camera work is already bad enough, guys. Please make this pain end.
on tape, there we go.
Are you ready? Dr. Jackson, thanks so much for that. Appreciate it. I had just one question. Could you explain a little bit about the Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnon and why are they...
Yeah, by the way,
Cro-Magnum.
Not even Cro-Magnon. Cro-Magnum. Like, you know what, guys? Like you need to go get size fitted for your Cro-Magnum raincoats, if you will. That's, you know what, Magnum should actually start that brand. Should start Cro-Magnum. Put little, like, I don't know, like cavemen on the wrappings. Why not, right?
they, I guess, differentiated in size
Oh yeah, by the way, guys, the audio sync is off because everything about this is just a dumpster fire.
and those kinds of things. Is that some sort of evolution within our own species? Could you just, I guess, expand on that a little bit?
The word
It is. It literally is.
evolution just means change. And if we're actually just talking about change, yeah, I mean, you look different from your grandfather, but a lot like your grandfather. Both of you are human.
Wow, it's almost like no
gee.
biologists use evolution in that sense to describe the the history of life on Earth.
Yeah.
Almost like no one uses it as just change. Like almost like you're trying to intentionally avoid the question or something. I don't know.
Actually, Darwin's book is called The Origin of the Species, which means originating new species. We're going there. Here we go. So, actually changing from one thing into another, no. But that same thing changes. Okay, like...
What is he? Do you even know what he's saying right now?
I
Like,
these are not coherent thoughts that he's having.
right, this is
He
just
mentioned
a jumble
origin
of
of
nonsense.
species, and then said things turning into things. Like that's not what Darwin was talking about. What are you saying, man?
Yeah,
What are
I
you
don't-
just describing?
I don't know.
if you made a donkey and a horse, you get a mule.
True,
Oh,
we'll take a
no.
drink. That's true. Well, specifically, what is it? It's got to be a male donkey and a mare. Because if you do a stallion and a jenny, then you get a innie because donkey names are ridiculous. And those are less frequently made because they're weaker than mules and they tend to be more ill-tempered. So, why bother?
Isn't it Haldane's rule is that the offspring has to be the one that is homogametic, because they have like either two X's or two Z's or whatever, because otherwise it's likely to be infertile. Isn't that the rule?
I'm not sure when it comes to donkeys and horses on that one. So possibly, I'm not sure.
That's all right.
Sorry.
We've now found out that horses can mate with zebras and get a zorse. Camels can
But
mate
is
with
it fertile or
llamas.
infertile?
I believe
Okay.
that they are infertile.
Camels and llamas! Yeah, these animals that are on separate hemispheres, they can mate and it produce fertile offspring.
Well, infertile in these
guy.
cases. If he got into like Panthera crosses, then he could get like weakly fertile. Because with like Panthera Leo x Panthera tigris, which the liger, female ligers are sometimes fertile with both parent species.
There are so with hybrids, I'm gonna say something, and anyone who accepts evolution is gonna go duh. Hybrids are typically less fertile the further away, the further back in time the common ancestor between the two mating species lived.
Mm-hmm.
And we can test this because you can take groups that are very speciose, and you can do a bunch of interbreedings between them. So this has been done, for instance, with Centrarchidae, which are the sunfish, very common fish in freshwater fish in North America, like bluegill, largemouth and smallmouth bass, black and white crappie, all those guys. Those are all sunfish. You can take them and you can interbreed them and figure out the viability of the hybrid offspring. And, to no one's surprise, the further back in time, so you work out the phylogeny, and then you start mating them in particular orders, and you can see, okay, the further back in time their common ancestor lived, the less likely the offspring are to be fertile. Right? And that makes perfect sense in terms of evolution, because more and more differences have accrued both through natural selection and genetic drift, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, no one's saying that within like a family you're not going to get any fertile offspring between two different species. It's just that the chance of having fertile offspring goes down the further back in time you go. Heck, a few years ago, I believe some Russian scientists got famous for mating a paddlefish and a sturgeon. and they're in separate orders.
Yeah, the paddlefish sturgeon hybridization was not something I was expecting.
Yeah, and they obviously they weren't intending to do that. They were just keeping paddlefish and sturgeon in the same holding tank, and it just so happened to come out because you're in the tank long enough with these other guys. You start wondering, but yeah, so they're different orders of fish, not just different families, different orders, and they produced offspring. Now, I have no idea if the offspring were fertile, and I have reasons to doubt, but at the very least, they produced an offspring, and that on its own is shocking, considering their common ancestor lived in, like, the Cretaceous. So
Right. Yeah, that's sort of on the same level as, like, a human producing a hybrid with, like, a rabbit.
yes,
It's not something you would super expect, but biology is weird sometimes.
Yeah, there's, for anyone who is, can I tell them about the hamster thing?
I guess so. I'm not sure which hamster thing it is, so go for it.
Okay, so if you remove the zona pellucida from a female hamster's ovum.
Okay, by the way, the zona pellucida is a membrane around the egg, which basically checks for chemical compatibility with the same species in incoming sperm, and rejects sperm that don't have the right chemical markers, which would indicate, with some anthropomorphization, as would indicate to the egg that this is the wrong species. So if you take that off, that chemical check to fertilization is removed.
I appreciate you, Dapper. I apologize for not leading with that. I appreciate
Yeah, zona
you very
pellucida
much.
is not. I feel like it's probably not in the common parlance, like most people.
But yes, so Dapper's absolutely right. So if you remove the zona pellucida from a hamster's ovum, you actually take a human sperm cell, spermatozoan, you can actually get and fertilize the hamster's ovum. You can actually get it to start doing divisions, right? Now, that really should make you wonder.
There's so many
where
weird
is
ethical
the
problems with that.
It's actually it happens in it's used as a test for sperm viability.
Yeah, I know.
as it happens, but
It's still weird.
for anybody who doesn't know that. But you're right. It is very strange. You should also put in your mind the question of where exactly is the humankind? If you want to say, it's your ability to produce like viable offspring. Well, you have to immediately acknowledge that like all taxonomic ranks are arbitrary, because if you can go up to order, that just throws everything out the window.
Mm-hmm.
But also, you have to ask, like, okay, how far can you go then in terms of development, right? Because if a human can get a hamster's ovum to do several divisions before terminating, well, what does that mean, right? Is there a certain number of divisions that it has to be able to go through? Is it the whole thing leading up to a
at what point do we start counting
birth?
it as a real birth, as a real organism? Like,
Right.
mules count apparently, but like, what if you had two species and they can make hybrids that only live like a year or two, which is very young
Right.
for either species? Does that count?
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, it was born after all.
Carrie
Yeah,
Bronson
so.
says, for $5, insert joke about your mother was a hamster here. Yeah. Guys, we're gonna take a
Right,
quick,
yeah.
we're gonna take a quick break. I need to add some ice and whiskey, this beverage I have here. And then we will be back. So we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna go to intermission. When we come back, I'll give a quick pitch for how to support the channel, and we'll dive back into this video, which somehow we're only like halfway through. I don't understand. All right, guys, we'll be right back. All right, well, you guys got a few transitional fossils in there for funsies. Certainly not because I'm bad at producing my own show that I've been producing for years. That's definitely not it. Which, by the way, Jackson, we've been doing this for more than a year.
That's bonkers.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It would be more than a year even if we hadn't. I think we missed at least a couple of like when they would regularly be scheduled. So we've been doing this for like 1.2 years or something. It's kind of crazy. Anyway,
Why are we existing this long, Dapper?
I don't know. Do you feel like you're Mr. Meeseeks? You're not used to having to. Anyway, so real quick, guys. This channel, as I'm sure most of you know, I say it a lot, is almost entirely supported directly by the generosity of viewers. So without people doing super chats, joining the channel membership, joining the Patreon, doing things like that, this just channel wouldn't exist. Or at the very least, it would exist on a much smaller scale. And that's because, I mean, direct ad revenue is almost nil. It's it's very low amounts. So I appreciate that. And if you are not currently supporting, but you're interested and you want to take a look, there's a whole bunch of options. There's the Patreon, where you can join that for as little as $1 a month, or even less if you go annually. Annually gets you a 12% discount on all tiers. There's the channel memberships. You can join at similar levels. It starts at $1.99. The Patreon gets you access to the server. Different tiers get you more perks, I suppose. Getting access to my special Discord server just for supporters. The same thing is true for the memberships, but the memberships also give you access to the emojis on the channel. Either way, you gain access to, I think, last I checked, something around like 8 hours of so far unreleased Dapper Dino content, which is a lot. So
That is a lot.
yeah. And also, if none of that's your thing, if you don't want to do like some kind of monthly or annual recurring charge, but you want to support, super chat, super thanks, super stickers are all obviously very helpful. But also, I have a Teespring store where you can get all sorts of merchandise, stickers, shirts, hoodies, blankets, pillows, all sorts of stuff, mugs. Also, Apocalypse Meow just said for $1.99, keep existing. All right, that's the plan for now, at least. And also, of course, if that's still not your speed, there's also other things you can do. Like I have an Amazon wishlist, which recently Dr. Tapioca Weasel got me a new mouse for my wishlist because my old mouse wasn't working, and I was using my backup mouse, which is a crappy little mouse that's basically like the kind of mouse your cheap boss buys for like the office computers. So I appreciate that. Yeah, all those things. But anyway, we're going to get back into this, and we're going to try to figure out if Charles Jackson actually becomes coherent at some point, because so far he hasn't really come up with an actual thought.
Doesn't get a comma. And everybody knows about the liger because of Napoleon Dynamite. Okay, ligers are real. Take a male lion and a female tiger, and they can mate, which means that they did come from the same thing. But by Carolus Linnaeus's...
It might be. He
'Cause,
does like to
from-
do... Yeah, he does like to do a lot of nerd street cred stuff, which it always feels really ingenuine coming from him, but maybe that's just my bias.
No, you're right. It does.
All right, here we go.
definition of species, and he's the guy that 400 years ago made up the binomial nomenclature system of classifying of all things.
He didn't define the species concept, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I don't think he did.
I mean, he had like a vague sort of morphological concept of species, as well as like a So he looked at the morphology and the reproductive methods of different organisms, and that was kind of how he delineated species. Like, if it was different enough from a different population, then he considered it a separate species. But you also have to remember, he was working with a lot fewer organisms and like no extinct organisms.
And also,
when
even
he did this,
with the extant species, he did not have an extensive data set for most of them.
he didn't have like any virtually any microbial species.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of plants. So, he was well-known botanist, but like, yeah, not that much. So
He was actually picking up on what the Bible said. Carolus Linnaeus.
Was he, though? Because I don't
Like,
remember
that's not true.
anything in the Bible about that. So I'm just going to take a drink because, well, I don't think Carolus Linnaeus' work contradicts really anything in the Bible. You can't get a taxonomy from the Bible. The Bible lumps whales with fish, bats with birds. I mean, you just can't. Take a drink. It has a thing called creeping things as one of its, like, classifications, which apparently includes some birds, in the sense that bats are called birds, but also like insects, but also like earthworms and there's absolutely no way to get a systematic taxonomy out of the Bible's text. It's just not going to happen. Yeah, just no.
Was looking at what the Bible said in Genesis, the kinds reproducing after their kinds, and the word species in Latin is derivative of the word kind.
No, it's not derivative
No.
of the word kind. It is, however, the word that directly translates from the word for kind in the original text. So, I mean, that is that. I mean...
What?
Okay, so, look. The word species in Latin does mean a kind, right? In the sense of, like,
Okay.
What kind of food is this? What
Okay.
kind of day have you been having? Right? And that's the reason that it was used by Carolus Linnaeus, right? Is because he wanted to know what the specific categories of organisms were. So he said, what kind of organism is this? Well, it's, I don't know, Bos tauros or something, right? Like that's a specific kind. Specific, that's what kind it is. And in Hebrew, the word that just generally means kind is mean. I can't remember what it is in Greek because a lot of Latin scholarship at the time was looking at the Greek version of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, but whatever. But all these words, mean, species, kind, in those respective languages are basically synonyms. But the thing is that in English and in Hebrew, they were never supposed to be technical terms. Carolus Linnaeus made a generic word in Latin into a technical term in his work by giving it a more restricted definition in the taxonomic sense. He didn't give it a great definition because, as we went over, his species concept was a little wibbly-wobbly. But, like, this whole thing is just an argument from etymology, which doesn't help, and he's also getting the etymology wrong, which is... It's insane. I'm taking a drink. Guys, argument from etymology is always a bad idea, but if you're going to do it, at least get the etymology right.
Or mean. The bara mean are the created kinds. So he was actually saying kinds reproducing after their kinds. Something is the same species if they can mate and have babies. So that would mean dogs and wolves are the same kind, the same species.
Yay, the biological species concept. As we've covered before, there's more than one species concept. The big ones that I can think of off the top of my head are the biological species concept, the morphospecies concept, the ecospecies concept, and what am I missing, Jackson? There's another big one.
Oh, there's so many of them.
So there's another like really big one though.
Did you say the phylogenetic species concept?
No, I didn't say the phylogenetic species concept. So yeah, those are like the big
like
four that I like.
ecological, morphological, yeah.
Yeah, and so what this means is there are cases where just the interbreeding criterion isn't very useful or impossible to detect, right? So we check other ones. So we have closely related populations, say coyotes and wolves. Well, in the biological species concept, they're probably not separate species. But let's take a look at the other ones. The morphospecies concept. Do they have significant distinctions in morphology that are consistent within the two populations? Yes. Yes, they do. Coyotes and wolves are not the same morphologically. The ecospecies concept. Do they fulfill the same niche in the same ecosystems? No. No. Even when they overlap in range, they don't fill the same niche. Okay. So the phylogenetic species concept. Do they have distinct lineages with limited gene exchange between them? Yes. So if we go with these four, and I consider them to be the big four in terms of species concepts, they don't make one of them, but they make the other three. So should Canis lupus and Canis latrans remain separate species? Yes. Is it messy? Is species concept, are they all messy and all of them have problems? Yes. I don't know what to tell you, man. That's just how it works. And yeah, actually, Paleolocus is right here. He says species, fake groups for convenience. Yeah, basically.
So I started I started reading Speciation by Coin and Ore, and he advances a number of arguments that species are definitely real and not just arbitrary constructs. And while I do not agree with the arguments he pushes, I do find it very humorous that when he goes to species concepts, he quotes approvingly someone is saying, "Yeah, just pick a set of criteria and then go from there." It's like, that sounds mighty arbitrary, my dude.
Right? That's the thing. It's like, within those criteria, maybe you're being objective within them, but like,
Sure,
you could have just as validly picked other criteria.
right? And because like with asexual organisms, obviously you can't do the
Biological
Mayer species concept.
Yeah.
You have to do like you have to look at like co-adapted clusters of genes, right? And determine, okay, these lineages differ substantially in these co-adapted clusters, so we are justified in calling them separate species or something like that.
Right.
Like, that's fine within that species concept. Doesn't mean the species are real, though. Just whatever. Anyway.
All right, here we go.
The wolf dog. But no, we call it Canis familiaris and Canis lupus.
Okay, we did, but at this point, the new rule, which is actually fairly recently new, because by the way, taxonomy does change, is that if a domesticated species would normally have priority in species name with its wild ancestor, and the wild ancestor is extant, instead of keeping has two species, and instead of using the domesticated species priority, which would have been the case before, they are now going to be in the same species with the priority given to the wild type, and the domesticated specific name now becoming a subspecies name. So the dog is no longer Canis familiaris, it is now Canis lupus familiaris. So there you go. That's the current rule. That's how it works. There's an official body in charge of all of this, and that's their ruling. Just like there's an official body in charge of whether or not Pluto's a planet, and sorry guys, it's a dwarf planet.
For some reason.
Yeah, for some reason, because when those two groups were described, it wasn't clear that they were the same species, but now it is, which is why we don't call the domesticated dog Canis familiaris, we call it lupus familiaris. My goodness. It's
Dogs and coyotes and jackals and dingoes. And
dingoes are dogs. I'm taking a drink.
They're just dogs. They're just feral dogs.
Specifically, the dingo is a land race of feral dogs. So we'll talk about what a land race is real quick after I read this super chat from Screw Bucket, who says, for $2, my favorite example would be ring species. Yeah, ring species are super cool. Yeah. They just kind of destroy the biological species concept, because at the two ends of the ring, they can't interbreed, which means that biologically they're different species. But then as you go around the continuous ring, each neighboring population can interbreed. So they're the same species, so same, but then you get to the two groups that were the same, transitively across the ring, but now they're different. Very weird. Anyway, what's a land race? So a land race is a variety of domesticated animal that's referred to when that variety has not been specifically bred as a breed. So you can think of them like breeds, but they're basically naturally occurring. So there are several land races of dogs. There's like a Central Asian urban land race of dogs. They have specific morphological characteristics. They're very clearly dogs. They're domesticated. If you raise them from puppies, they act just like dogs. And dingoes are a similar population. So basically, it is when a domesticated population isn't under specific artificial selection, but it remains basically that domesticated population. Dingoes are a land race of domestic dogs in Australia that have become largely feral. However, when raised as puppies, they are just dogs. They're somewhat peculiar dogs. For instance, they don't bark very much, and they have some behavioral quirks. But yeah, dingoes are just dogs. They're not a separate species. They're not even a separate subspecies. But also, the golden... Oh! Drink for Godzilla. But also, like, jackals? Now, if I remember correctly, Canis aureus is still in Canis, but several other jackals have moved into other genera, but whatever. And like Canis latrans, the coyote, like, yeah, these are species. The fact that they can interbreed with wolf doesn't negate their membership in a separate species by the other species.
and maybe even foxes, and certainly all the different kinds, the 200 different
No.
breeds of pure breeding dogs.
No,
Foxes are like vulpes. That's different genus. Same
Yeah.
family, different genus though.
as far as I know, there are no Vulpes Canis hybrids. For one thing, I've
Yeah,
never
I
heard of such
don't. I don't think because there's different. They have different ploidies, different sets of chromosome numbers, don't they?
I believe that is true.
Or at the very least, different. They at the very least have different. I mean, not sets
don't
of
have different
chromosomes, but
ploidy,
just
but they
different,
have different
numbers.
numbers, yeah.
Different numbers of chromosomes. Yeah,
they're both
right,
diploid as far as I know, but like they don't
Yes,
have the same number.
but yeah.
It would be interesting if
right,
we found out
right,
that like
yeah.
somehow foxes were like hexaploid. Be like, oh, wasn't expecting that.
That would be bonkers. Yeah, I'm not.
Plus, things like hexaploidy tend not to persist. It tends to collapse down to to diploid after a while. Because as the
But yeah, it's.
oh, sorry,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say as the different chromosomes like accrue mutations and actual structural changes, tend to not be able to still call them like another copy of the same chromosome. So it tends to just go back into diploid after a while. Because I mean,
Yeah, they're
all
the
animals
chromosome
have
number,
like whole chromosome or a whole genome duplication events in their history, which would
Yes,
technically
yeah.
mean. So what does that mean? That like humans are like hexaploid or octoploid? Well, no, because we collapse back down.
No,
to
we're still.
diploid
Yeah, we're still
at various
diploid.
points. Right.
Dogs. They're all dogs. They would be in the dog kind because they're
How do you know?
interfertile.
Foxes are not dogs.
They're not interfertile. Not all members of Canidae are interfertile. Taking a drink. Look, I don't even know of any like Kuon Canis hybridization events, and those are two genera that are very closely related. The Kuon is the genus of the dhole, which is a wild dog from like South and Central Asia. And Canis is the genus, the gray wolf, the golden jackal, the coyote, whatnot. Then there's like Lycaon, which is the African painted dog, not interfertile with any other genus. There's the maned wolf, which is genus Chrysocyon, I believe.
Yeah, something like that.
Also not interfertile with other genera of canines. Vulpes is not interfertile with other genera of canines. Like, this is just not a thing. It's just not. He should have gone with Felidae, because Felidae actually has higher rates of interfertility than Canidae does.
You're assuming that he knows things about biology, which is your first mistake.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Yeah, goodness. Oof.
They should be listed as the same species, but anyway.
No!
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 Goodness, I'm taking a
Freaking
drink.
no!
The fact that the only species concept that you recognize is the biological species concept doesn't mean anything for anyone else there, Bad Jackson. Goodness.
Darwin's book really should have been called The Origin of the Orders and the Origins of the Classes.
No!
Why?
No, in fact, you know what? Actually, opposite direction. Darwin really didn't actually talk about speciation that much in Origin of Species. He sort of confuses like incremental adaptations and just saying like that will eventually lead to speciation, which okay, sure, but like that's not a very detailed process. It really, Origin of Species should be like the origin of adaptations or something like that, because that's really what he devotes much of the book to, is describing how these organisms adapt to their environment. Right? It's not really so much this is how like pre and post zygotic barriers arise, because that wasn't worked out till way later.
Yeah, he didn't even know about any of that stuff.
No.
Also, we have a $20 super chat from Erachamian. Thank you very much. Who says, the first Google result for fox-dog hybrid doesn't say it's actually possible, but it has this interesting Akkadian omen. If a fox mates with a dog, the land will be destroyed. I guess that must have happened, because as far as I know, the Akkadian civilization has gone away. Which actually, so this is a little off topic, was very off topic, but I want to mention it. So a little while back, I was investigating into like Semitic historical linguistics and looking into like the reconstruction of Proto-Semitic. And one of the things that's very important for the reconstruction of Proto-Semitic is actually Akkadian, because it's the only East Semitic language that we have extensive information about. Whereas all the extant Semitic languages like Tigrinya, Amharic, Arabic, Hebrew, and whatnot, those are all, and also the various like tiny little Semitic languages that you get in parts of like the Hijaz and like Sukotri, like from Sumatra. All of those are West Semitic languages. So you can use those on their own to create like a Proto-West Semitic, but if you want to get Proto-Semitic, then you have to include Akkadian. Anyway, but it was very interesting because like one of the things that was very weird is the degree to which Arabic is or standard Arabic is like absurdly conservative in really weird ways. Like it still uses almost the exact same phonology and this almost the exact same vowel system as like Proto-Semitic. It was very bizarre. And then like Akkadian has its own interesting East Semitic like novelties that you don't get in the other Semitic languages that you might be more familiar with. Anyway, that's completely off topic. Who cares? Moving on.
And the origins of the phyla. If you make it species, you get in.
Hey, you know what the origin of the phyla is? It's just speciation a long time ago. That's literally all it is.
There's a book that I've read. It's titled "On the Origin of Phyla" by James Valentine, nice. And funny enough, he also does not really spend a lot of time talking about the origin of the various animal phyla. Nice. However, he does. So much of the book is. So the first section, and it's been a few years since I read it, but the first section of the book is like, talking about like how to do systematics and how to work in paleontology to statistics and all that sort of stuff. And then he spends much of the book talking about just going through the major characteristics of the various animal phyla. It doesn't spend a super lot of time talking about like the actual genetic, developmental, and morphological processes that like led to the various phyla. It's kind of sad, but it's a cool book overall. Very, very good as a reference. That's also where I learned about carnivorous sponges, because poriferans are fungi, as we all know from Dapper's channel.
Oh my goodness! Who was that? That was Carl Kirby who thought that poriferan sponges were fungi.
But yeah, I was not aware of carnivorous sponges until I read that book. So, thank you, James Valentine.
There you go.
But also, you're right. The origin of phyla is just speciation, but in the past.
Right. If you go back 500 million years ago and you have a speciation event, we'll probably call that different phyla at this point. That's literally what's happening. Because the thing is, the different taxonomic ranks, right, all started just by simple speciation, but in the past. And so the members of the different clades that are produced from the speciation become more and more different as time goes on from each other. So at some point, there was a common ancestor of, say, arthropods and velvet worms. That's, Arthropoda and Onychophora, those two different phyla. And the common ancestor definitely had a segmented body with paired limbs and a front end and a back end, and probably had antennae too. Well, guess what? When those two groups first speciated, you could barely tell the difference between them, even though one went on to go be modern velvet worms that shoot glue out of their eyeballs or whatever, and don't have an exoskeleton and are just weird, squishy, adorable, wormy things. Then the other one became like crabs and spiders. I don't know what to tell you.
It is in fact the case that paleontologists do have difficult times figuring out where things like Ischia and other what are called lobopods go, because it's like, well, is it more closely related to onychophorans or is it more closely related to arthropods? And you have these back and forth.
Could it be basal to both?
Right, yeah, there's like Pemdolurion and Macella and all these other. It's a paraphyletic grade called Lobopodia, which is the armored worms, whatever you call it. And these guys are like mostly from the Cambrian. But there's a huge diversity of them in the Cambrian when we see our earliest, arthropods and onychophorans, crazy stuff, and also tardigrades. And we have this big group of like stem panarthropods. We have some stem panarthropods in the like a small number of them in the late Ediacaran. You get a whole bunch of them like in the Cambrian, in the early Cambrian. You get like progressively more derived arthropods.
Weird. It's almost like exactly what you would expect.
No, it's bonkers, right?
Yeah, and it's also like, hey, if you explain the origin of species, you've also explained the origin of phyla. Fun times.
The gray thingies here, and the definition of species in biology is certainly a lot grayer than it used to be. Now,
Yeah, because we
You know what?
more.
He's right.
Yeah, we'll take a drink.
you were asking about Neanderthals and blah 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 blah. Yeah.
I can't believe how badly off the synchronization on the sound is by this point.
I honestly can't tell if he really just said that or I just, like, my brain tuned him
No,
out.
he did
and
say
all I
bloody,
heard was
bloody,
blah,
blah.
blah, blah. Okay.
Yeah, no, he actually did.
This is one of the things here. Have you ever noticed that in most evolutionary films, the primitive human
What's an evolutionary film? I want
Walking
to know.
with dinosaurs.
Is that just a film that doesn't, like, ignore science completely? Because, I mean, they all do a bit.
are less intelligent than the animals? Yeah.
Oh, I've never noticed that. Okay. All right. We're going to ask, this is going to become a poll now. All right, so start a poll. Have you seen, quote, evolutionary, end quote, films portraying ancient hominins as less intelligent than other animals? That is literally the complete total number of, get rid of the quotations because that just barely goes over the character limit. Yes, no, and here we go. All right, there you go, guys. Because I have no idea what he's talking about. Like, did Walking with Cavemen portray the hominins as stupider than the other animals? I don't think so. I mean, it certainly portrayed some of them as weaker than some of the other animals. Like, you know, my guess is that, like, an Australopithecus is not going to have a fun time against, like, a saber-toothed cat, but, like, doesn't make
Just
it
mad.
stupider.
He's mad Lucy didn't just punch, like, the Dinofelis and declare victory. That's what he's mad about.
Goodness.
The humans in
There was a
Ice
scene
Age
where one of them gets, like, trampled by a Dinothere, which was pretty whack.
couldn't talk.
Oh, he's talking about Ice Age, the cartoon? The cartoon that has animals from wildly different time periods and places all just kind of hanging out? And where the main characters are the animals and not the humans, and it's told from the animals' point of view, and the animals are obviously anthropomorphized, things that can talk and think like modern humans. The thing that no one should be taking seriously as how the actual Ice Ages worked. I'm taking a drink for, like, the movie Ice Age is evolutionary propaganda that says the primitive humans were dumb. Come on, man. That is absolutely insane.
Clearly he missed the part where, like, the Eocene Brontotheres were trying to kill the Pleistocene sloth, you know?
But look, by the same logic, Toy Story is indicating that toys are more intelligent than kids are. That's big toy propaganda. That's Satan trying to trick you into treating your toys like people. What are we talking about right now?
Evil Jackson lives in, like, constant paranoia about, like, the toys in his house being alive.
Right, because he saw
like,
Toy
his room
Story.
is, like, has nothing but, like, a mattress on the floor, because he's like, I'll have nothing in my room that has eyes.
Yep. Yeah. My goodness. I hate everything about this right now. Taking another drink because my brain might melt. Okay, let's see. My goodness. Here I am thinking it's like going to be Walking with Cavemen, like a documentary series.
Yeah.
Nope.
No.
Ice Age. God.
You set your expectations too high again, Dapper. That's the problem.
I don't know how to set them low enough for this guy. It's impossible.
You remember how I was telling you about the family that got lost in the straight hallway? He is the family.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Basically.
But the saber-toothed tiger and the little weasel guy and, you know, the
He's a
mastodon,
sloth.
they could talk.
He's a
Okay. So
Yep. It's just Ice Age.
Also, I don't think. Oh, they did have weasels in the second one. That's all right.
Too Young
Okay.
to Feel This Old for $5 says, the kiddos wanted to say, good night, Dapper. Gotta go read them their book. See y'all in the Discord. All right. Good night, kids. Have a wonderful night. I hope you enjoy the book. I hope it's a good book.
according to evolution
As we
story,
all-
at what point
As we
did
all
animal
know,
rights
weasels that lived in the Pleistocene were famously voiced by Josh Peck. Just
in real life. They all just had his voice somehow. Never mind the fact that like they didn't have the actual morphological like speech apparatus for this. Just don't worry about it. Dr. Tapioca Weasel says expect him to be like Shmuel Pollen. Yeah, I mean, I think he's a bit of a step up from Shmuel Pollen because he doesn't deny actual math. Nor have I seen Dr. Charles Jackson forget that food exists. What? You haven't heard about Shmuel Pollen? What? Shmuel Pollen.
No,
so he claims to be a rabbi. I have no idea how accurate that is because I'm not going to check up on like the legitimacy of his claim to be a rabbi. It makes no difference to me. But he thinks that the growth of babies violates the first law of thermodynamics because that is matter and energy coming into being out of nowhere, ignoring the fact that food's a thing. He also thinks that arithmetic is so poorly defined that it basically is just meaningless gobbledygook. He also seems to believe in spontaneous generation of certain kinds of maggots in fish because the Talmud indicates that that's how those particular maggots come to exist. And rather than saying, well, maybe the Talmud got it wrong, he's just doubling down on, spontaneous generation is totally a thing. This fish meat just turns into maggots sometimes.
Is this a video you did that I missed?
No, Logic did this series.
Okay, that explains it.
Shmuel Pollen.
I was like, what?
Oof. It's quite a thing.
I like Logic stuff, but I haven't watched his videos in a long time. But yeah, I like his stuff. But good lord.
Yeah, it's
oh my god.
The Shmuel Pollen. Like, if you haven't seen that, the title of the book that Logic is reviewing is All In for God. So, like, if you search All In for God Logic, you'll probably find it. And my goodness.
So he's reviewing a book. He's just reading through it like lime. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, it's.
Oh man.
Yeah, maybe Rabbi Shmuel Pollen is a special case here. All right. Although interestingly enough, also what was it? Yosef Mizrahi definitely isn't a real rabbi, but who pretends to be one. Also says that babies are a violation of the first law of thermodynamics because they just spontaneously generate new mass.
Why?
Yeah. He also has no idea how massive a zygote is, and he overestimated the mass of a zygote by several orders of magnitude for some reason.
What's a few zeros between friends, right?
Rights and human rights become two separate things. The idea that ancient people were dumber, oh man,
is itself
dumber
dumb.
Mean?
Yeah, it just means less intelligent generally. Like, look, ancient humans weren't dumber. They just didn't have as much accumulated knowledge as we do. So they did things that we would consider dumb because we know better. It doesn't mean they were less intelligent, right? They were just as intelligent as you are. They just did not have the same thousands of years of accumulated knowledge that comes with things like the invention of writing or sedentary civilizations can pass down information.
Yeah. We still can't figure out how they built the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Oh my goodness.
Stop! Please, dear. Is he like a Von Daniken person?
I don't know.
Are we gonna find that he's actually ancient aliens or something like that?
No, because it's gonna be ancient angels. Because I don't think he believes in
ancient angels. There we go. That's
the angels came down and helped. Maybe it was the fallen angels who came down and helped them build the pyramids. Because obviously the Egyptians weren't good Christians.
Dumb.
Yeah.
That's so. Oh my.
Okay,
God,
so guys,
so dumb.
Here's a few things. When we say we don't know how the pyramids were built, that's in the sense of we don't know the exact techniques, but we have more than one hypothesis which would have worked and are viable, right? It's sort of like if you come to a painting and you don't know exactly what techniques or what pigments were used to make the painting, that doesn't mean it required a miracle. That just means you're not exactly sure which pigments are in there. But you have options. Like the building of the pyramids isn't a mystery in the sense of how could this possibly have happened? It's a mystery in the sense of well, we've got 4 options and we're not sure which one it is. But it's one of them. I personally like the internal ramp hypothesis because I think it's very viable and also backed by more data than the rest of them. So the internal ramp hypothesis says that basically the stones were moved primarily on boat from upstream, so it's south. But then when they got to the building site, which remember, at the time the pyramids were built, pyramids were on the banks of the Nile. So they're offloaded, and they're moved on sledges with, wooden skids, basically, up a ramp that's inside the pyramid, be positioned in there. And then as the pyramid is completed, there might have been some kind of temporary external ramp for some of the top parts or something. But for the most part, it's just built with an internal ramp. There have been internal, density tests done that revealed a spiral shape, density anomaly inside some of the pyramids, which is used as evidence for this. It's plausible. I like it. Erechamian says for $10, the angels had to help the Egyptians build the pyramids because the people didn't know how to store their grain. Oh my goodness. Which is a reference to the fact that Ben Carson thinks the Great Pyramids of Giza were granaries in the time of Joseph. So here's the big thing about a granary. What does a granary have to do? It's got to hold a large volume of grain. That's why you call it a granary, right? It's like a nunnery. That's where you store nuns. A granary is where you store grain.
Store nuns. I like the visual of putting them on a little hook or something in the closet.
Right. Hey, I've met some very nice nuns in my time. I have nothing against nuns per se.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm just it's like by their collar, you just hang them up on a little hook, in a closet or something.
Anyway, so one of the things that this means is that you have to have a relatively large internal volume, because that's the entire point of a granary, right? You have internal space to put things. The pyramids are almost entirely solid rock. They're the least reasonable granaries in the world. And to be fair, Charles Jackson isn't saying that. That's a Ben Carson thing. Because Ben Carson is also a young Earth creationist, but he happens to be a Seventh-day Adventist. So, don't want to talk too much about that, because most young Earth creationists don't like the Seventh-day Adventists because they accept a post-biblical prophet, or prophetess, whatever, which most Christians think is heretical. Whatever.
Yeah, right.
People invented geometry, for goodness sake. I think
did they invent geometry? It's kind of hard to say.
Oh, right? No, we're not getting into this debate. Moving on.
Yeah, first, geometry was probably invented several times in different places, and at various times the Egyptians were more or less advanced than other people. They learned how to make columns basically from the Greeks, but even then at first they were it's a little iffy. So rather than building real columns, they had columns that were actually still attached physically by load-bearing structures to the other walls. So they were insets instead of actual columns. And eventually they learned to trust columns. But then other times they had extremely good levels and plumb bobs that they used to get very exacting angles on pyramids. So it's like most things in ancient history. It's complicated, and we don't know everything we would like to.
they were smarter than us.
There's no evidence that the Egyptians were smarter than us on taking a drink. They just weren't dummies, which we all knew anyway.
Plenty of evidence that we are gotten a J-curve of dumber.
Oh, there's what evidence?
What?
Maybe he'll present the evidence that we've gotten dumber.
And dumber. The only reason we have effective technology is because of the past.
It's an
We haven't
AIG
invented anything
meme.
new
That's
in
what he's
50
got.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
years. Nothing new. What about?
What he said we haven't gotten anything new in 50 years?
What
does that even mean?
50,000 years, and I think he means in terms of cognitive ability, which is probably mostly true that in 50,000 years, Homo sapiens' cognitive ability really hasn't changed all that much.
Sure. I mean, that's a pretty short time evolutionarily, so sure.
Yeah, but also oh yeah, and he did laugh at that, but no one else did, so that counts as a joke that didn't land. Thanks for pointing that out, MB. Yeah, Savage Cobra 42 says smarter than Dr. Jackson, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know any evidence that humans have gotten significantly less intelligent over the past any given period of time.
This meme here, it's again, it's not that they're dumb. It's like Dapper said earlier. If they don't have the technology, the thousands of years of cultural history to build, ranged weapons and things like that, where they can very efficiently keep predators and stuff like that at bay, then they're not stupid just because they didn't have that. They just didn't have it because they hadn't invented it yet.
Right.
They did in fact invent different weapons and stuff, and we have a whole archaeological record of human tools dating back to like of hominin tools dating back to like 3 million years ago. So they're not stupid. This is a meme.
Yeah. Although I will say, I actually do like the character design on the saber-tooth. There's I just like the aesthetic on it. I don't know. Like, it's got interesting muscle definition on like the forelimbs. Doesn't have quite enough toes, but whatever. Like all the sharp teeth are just amusing. It's got a fun expression. I don't know. So like, good job to Dan Latha on the character design, specifically on the saber-tooth cat. The human less so. I don't know what you're going for there, but like the cat, I like it. Anyway.
About cell phones, Dr. Jackson. A cell phone is a miniaturization of Marconi's wireless, Tesla's wireless, Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, and...
Oh my goodness, I'm going to talk about this caption. So according to the evolutionary story, at what point did animal rights and human rights become two separate things? When it happened when humans started defining rights for themselves, because whether or not natural rights is a coherent thing or a reasonable thing, if humans don't actually acknowledge and enforce the rights for each other, then whether or not you have the natural rights doesn't matter. They just don't exist. They practically don't exist. Right? So because humans started defining these things for humans, that's when human rights became a thing. And now that there are humans who would like to extend this enfranchisement of rights having to non-humans, that's why animal rights is a somewhat separate issue. And also, it's separate because even most people who are big advocates for animal rights don't actually think that all of the human rights should also, or even could also, be extended to non-human animals. Like, what does freedom of conscience mean for, like, I don't know, like a chicken? What does freedom of religion mean for a chicken?
Yeah.
They don't do that. So, like, you can say it's a human right, but does it make any sense to say, like, oh, you got to give cows the right of self-determination? Like, they even have that capacity? I don't know.
I do think it's interesting, however, Australopiths were still around. I think the question of human and animal rights would be a lot more interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
Or for chimps, already, I mean, in today and in the past, few decades, as animal rights have become like more and more of a burgeoning field, the more and more rights are being extended to the other great apes, right, as well as other primates, pretty generally, which makes sense, right? We typically tend to assess like value on things relative to ourselves, right?
Right.
And so you have these great apes, which are the most similar, among organisms to us, and so it kind of makes sense that we're extending the most rights to them, or the most consideration of rights to them.
Yeah.
Right. And the same is true of like we're also doing this with like cats. Feral cats are a big problem in many parts of the world, but if you look at polls, lots of polls show that people are fewer and fewer people want to just kill cats outright as a means of stopping their spread. Mm-hmm. Right? They want to do things humanely, like trap, neuter, release, or trap, vasectomy, hysterectomy, release, or what have you. And so, this is just weird. This is weird. But I wish that Australopiths were still around, because they would make the whole human-animal rights conversation very interesting.
See, I don't, for actually kind of a related reason, because I think that humans would have a long history of abusing Australopiths in the same way that they do with chimpanzees.
Probably true.
And so I think there would be a whole lot more, even more questionable, probably unethical experiments and whatnot that would have gone on. Because, like...
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Like with the sewing, like, monkeys' eyes shut and things like that, and figuring out like how their brain develops and that sort of stuff. Right. Yeah, no, we'd probably do that with Australopiths. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So like, it's almost like a mercy that they're not available for humans to do horrible things to. Like, my goodness.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna get a little bit more in, and then we're gonna close it up.
Michael Faraday's batteries, and also the computer chip. is a transistor. It's a
No, it's not a transistor. Bunch of transistors, a complicated array forming logic gates and memory cells and all this stuff. I'm just taking a drink for computer chips are a transistor. I know enough about electronics to know how stupid that is. It's basically the same as saying humans are a cell. Nope. That's not true. They're made of cells, I'll grant you that. But you're not a cell, Dr. Jackson.
modified transistor. Where are all the hoverboards? And
Okay. I'm going to talk about what a transistor is real quick, and we're going to wrap it up. So what is a transistor? Well, a transistor is kind of like a diode. So what a diode is basically it lets current flow in one direction but not the other. So if you just have a piece of copper wire, right, you can put an AC current through there, and it will carry that current just as well on both sides of that sine wave, right? Current will go back and forth. It's fine. Great. A diode only allows current going through one way. It's complicated as to how this is achieved. Basically, it's called a semiconductor, and you can use what's called doping, which is replacing certain elements of the crystal matrix of the actual conductive portion of the diode with certain chemicals. You don't have to get into all of that. Basically, a diode just is like a check valve for electricity. A transistor is a diode, basically, but it has a third input. And it blocks current unless the third input sees voltage. So it only allows current to go through in a particular direction, but also you can flip it on and off. So when it doesn't have voltage applied to that third input, then it just it's an open in the circuit, right? Current can't cross that, even if there's a voltage potential across it. So what that means is by controlling that third input, you can change whether or not the transistor is actually going to allow current flow. And what you do with this is basically that third input basically then becomes a yes-no check. And you can arrange these physically. Like you actually have to physically arrange them in different shapes with conductive links between them. But when you combine them in certain patterns, they form what are called logic gates. Logic gates allow you to take more than one input, look at what the value is, true, false, or does have voltage applied or not. So, ones or zeros, and then come up with an output. So if you have an OR gate, you get a few transistors together, and you arrange them such that if any of the inputs has in fact a 1, then it outputs a 1. You can get an AND gate, where it has to have both inputs have a 1, and then it outputs a 1. And then you combine these logic gates into larger circuits, and eventually, when you have millions of these transistors, in fact, in some cases, billions, then you can get a computer chip. And a computer chip is made out of all of these transistors themselves turned into logic gates. The logic gates, in some cases, combine into even bigger logic gates because there's this concept called the universal logic gate. It says that using a few different logic gates, you can actually use them to construct the functionality of any other logic gate. And then all of that builds up into a chip that has a whole bunch of inputs and a whole bunch of outputs that do predictable things. Often cases, very complicated things. And this is just as silly as saying that a human is a cell, right? Like it's not the case that computer chips are transistors. They're made from transistors. Anyway, I have no idea why I'm doing like a weird dive into like what electronics is all about and how transistors work. Like
I was here for it.
Granted, but like I don't think anyone was expecting to hear like a talk about what's a transistor. And I had to dive deep because it's been a long time since I've looked into like the basics of electronics and like logic truth tables for logic gates and transistors. I actually used to know how to build logic gates out of transistors, and I could actually diagram out like various logic circuits just all the way down to the transistor level. I can't do it anymore. Anyway.
Big sad.
Well, look, when do I ever need to do that? When is that ever important to me? All right, guys. TD Lane says, no, keep going. Look, it's late. We're going to close this out. Then I'm going to be in my Discord to hang out with people. We're probably going to watch some Power Rangers with Tommy Oliver. Because in case you guys didn't know, the guy who played Tommy Oliver unfortunately died a few days ago, or I think 2 days ago. That was a bit of a tragedy. If you were anyone who's involved in the Power Rangers fandom at all, Jason David Frank, very famous, probably the most famous Power Ranger. Anyway, Jackson, you got anything that you want to announce to people? What's coming up on your channel?
We just did the Sloth's Tale, so now we're leaving placental mammals and entering the wacky world of marsupials with the Marsupial Sloth's Tale.
But you're still in Theria.
We are. This is going to be the 22nd episode, and we're still in Theria.
Oof.
There
All
are
right.
many episodes about mammals.
All
So
right.
yeah.
Well, on this channel, let's take a look at what's coming up. So, if you're American, then you might know that Thursday is Thanksgiving. However, we're still having our regularly scheduled noon upload, or premiere, I suppose. So yeah, I'll be here. I'm still, mostly gonna take the day off, but like there'll be a premiere. On Saturday, I have no idea, not a clue. Don't even ask me right now. I don't know what's going on. Then on the 29th, we're gonna be doing Kent with Bent. I think it's 97. No, it's 96. I think it's 96. We're getting close to our 100th episode, and we're gonna be doing something a little special for that. So don't worry, that'll be a thing. And then on the 1st of December, it'll be the next upload. So the 24th is going to be episode 2 of the Robert Carter series. Then episode 3 will be on the 1st, and then episode 4, the final episode, will be on the 8th. So there you go. Oh, it'll be 97, says Benthoven. Okay. 97. Which actually means 98 will be on the 6th, and then probably 99 will be on the 13th of December, which means that the 3rd of January is probably when our 100th episode will air. That's what it's looking like. So, if that happens, look out. It'll probably be longer. We might have more guests than normal. We change up the format just a little bit. But other than that, guys, thank you very much for coming to the show. Really appreciate it. Check out all the links in the description for, Patreon, Amazon wishlist, all that stuff, if you want to. If you don't worry about it. And we are out of here.
Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Work in Progress, Benthoven, Tapioca Weasel, Denny5252, Ian Chen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babdy, McSpooks, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, and Atheist Animal. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if the annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wishlist, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.